We are back on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio News Talk, 1180, 1230, KGEO, 1410 KERI, and now in Albuquerque, New Mexico on 1000 KKIM. Our guest by phone, Stephen Harding, author of The Last Battle, the story of American and German soldiers fighting together.
Wow, this is really an interesting story.
I know, isn't it
I'm
fascinating?
intrigued here.
Yeah.
So let's continue. What's happening next?
So when this mixed force of Americans and Germans arrives at the castle, to the decidedly unimpressed view of the French prisoners, Jack Lee basically takes command and says, "We are going to hold this place until a larger Allied unit shows up." So he essentially sets up a defense. Now, this is a castle, thick stone walls. There's only one way in, which is through a fortified front gate that you reach by crossing a very narrow bridge over a ravine from a little nearby village. So even though he doesn't have a whole lot of people, and they're not all that well armed, they've got the main gun on this M4 Sherman tank, a couple of machine guns from the tank, and then the small arms that the American GIs and the German soldiers have, and some hand grenades. They're in a pretty good defensive position. I was just at the castle last September, and I wouldn't want to try and take it, even from a small defensive force. But at the same time, the SS unit that's coming to the castle to do in the prisoners is it's kind of the remnants of part of the 17th SS Panzer Grenadier Regiment, and these are very hardcore gentlemen. They fought the Russians, they fought the Allies, and they're sort of die hard. They are going to take this castle no matter what it takes. So we have a setup for a tremendous fight, which starts early in the morning on May 5th. And the Germans assault the castle, and the mixed American and German force defends the castle. And that's the crux of the story, how the small group of defenders fight off this Waffen-SS assault on this medieval castle.
And let's leave the ending as far as what happens, Clay, to people, actually getting them to buy the book.
Well, what I don't find really interesting is the Americans and the Germans were fighting together against the Germans.
I know, isn't that amazing?
That is amazing.
Yeah. That's an incredible story.
But my question to you, Steve, is why did they want to kill these prisoners? What was the main reason?
I think at this point, Clay, it was mainly revenge. As we know, the Nazis, even though the war was lost, everybody had known it was lost for some time. As the Allies advanced into the heart of Germany, Himmler and some of the other Nazi leaders ordered prisoners in a lot of the concentration camps killed. They ordered some Allied POWs to be killed. It was mainly revenge, but also in the case of the people in the concentration camps, the Nazis didn't want them to be able to reveal to the Allies just how horrific the concentration camps had been. And Jack Lee and his men, who were part of the 12th Armored Division, had helped liberate some of the concentration camps south of Munich. So for them to be able to sort of join forces with Germans, now the Germans that Sepp Gangl led were not SS troops, they were a regular German army. But still, for Jack Lee to be able to join forces was thinking way outside the box. And I think it's because he was a pragmatist. He knew that this castle had to be protected, and he needed the help of Sepp Gangl and his soldiers. So he, sort of sized Gangl up as the same sort of professional soldier that he was, and that's where that sort of partnership came from.
Have you talked to any of these people, Steve? Are any of these people still alive?
Yeah, actually, when I was writing the book, I was able to locate 3 Americans, all of whom took part in the fight for the castle. Sadly, one of them has since died. The other 2, one was a young infantryman who got kind of scooped up to come along, and the other gentleman was a member of Jack Lee's tank crew. And I'm happy to say that since the book has come out and has done very well, actually, the French government is considering giving the 2 surviving American soldiers the Croix de Guerre for their role in saving the French VIPs. I really hope this works out for them.
It seems like there's a ton of underlining stories here with each individual, and this ought to be either a mini-series or a book.
Well,
I mean, not a book, but a movie.
As I mentioned, that's sort of in process now. The book has been optioned by a very well-known screenwriter in L.A. named Bryce Zabel, and we are currently in talks with some fairly major players about making this into the film that it really ought to be. I mean, as soon as I heard this story years ago, I thought, wow, this would make a great movie. But I had to write the book first. So
Sure. Now, where's the story been for the last 70 years? I mean, I'm a history buff. I was going to be a history teacher at one time, and, I don't know the story. I've mentioned it to a couple people I know that would know, and they said, you got to be kidding me.
Well, I think the major thing, Marty, is that you have to remember this was 2 days at the end of a very long war in Europe. People on both sides believed the war was going to be over within hours. In the United States, people were still focused. Remember, we continued fighting in the Pacific for several months, so people were already thinking about beating the Japanese. And this was a very small event. There were, other firefights going on between Allied and Axis troops, but they were mainly skirmishes. And then to have this odd little battle take place, and for it to involve such an odd cast of characters, all it really generated was a couple of newspaper articles that were quickly buried by the major news coming out of the actual capitulation of Germany and then the continuation of the war against Japan.
Sure. We're having a conversation with Steve Harding, author of The Last Battle, the story of American and German soldiers fighting together. I want to spend a little bit of time going over your background. Now, you were in the Army from 71 to 74. Mm-hmm. You've got a couple degrees in history. I envy that, by the way. You're a military journalist, and right now you're the senior editor at Military History Magazine.
I am indeed. It's an excellent publication. It's part of what is called the Weider History Group. We're the largest producer of history magazines in the United States. And it's really nice to be able to do for a living what I find so interesting in the rest of my life.
Well, it's interesting because I'm a reader of Military History Magazine. I love that magazine, and it's got a lot of really great articles in there. So, and you've reported from Northern Ireland, Iraq. I mean, you've been in the thick of it all as a military journalist. I have. I find it much safer and more enjoyable to be sitting behind a desk as an editor, I can tell you that.
I think it's really great that you're reporting history as history was rather than trying to change it as our current administration seems to be trying to do.
Well, all I would say about that, Clay, is that history, people tend to think that history is cut and dried, and it really isn't. History is evolutionary. We're just finding out things now from World War II, for example, that have been secret for 60, 70 years. So history is a process, and as a historian, as I like to think of myself, my job is to constantly tell the most accurate, concise, and informative story that I can, based on the information I have now. And fortunately, I was able to find a whole lot of information about the Castle Itter battle that no one had ever bothered to look for before. Well,
I have to tell you, Steve, you've just picked up a couple of readers that I've talked to about this book, and I've got a couple of your books that I've already ordered. One of them that I'd like you to talk about for a moment is Voyage to Oblivion. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that story briefly.
The brief take on Voyage to Oblivion is on December 7th, 1941, when, of course, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Possibly just before they attacked Pearl Harbor, you'll have to read the book to find out about the timing, a small U.S. Cargo vessel called the Cynthia Olsen was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine halfway between Los Angeles and Honolulu. The entire crew disappeared, and it was a mystery for many, many years how the ship was sunk, what happened to the crew, and were they, in fact, the first Americans killed by the Japanese in the Pacific War. And that's the core story of Voyage to Oblivion.
Wow, and so you've written a story about what happened to them, or do we know what happened to them, or is it still speculation?
I was able to find out what happened to them, or at least what I am able to put forth as my idea what happened to them. There is a lot of really good background information on the ship, but I go into the history of the ship and the people who were on board and the Japanese submariners who attacked them. It's a fascinating little story. Again, I like those stories in history history, Marty, that haven't been told before, where you can really get in and sort of break new ground. And Voyage to Oblivion was one of those.
So if we want to know what happened to him, we need to buy the book.
That's sort of what I would like to have happen, Clay.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've done with The Last Battle. We haven't disclosed what the ending is, but if you want to find out more about this particular book, The Last Battle, you can get it almost anywhere now, right?
Right, and there is a Facebook page that people can go to that'll show some pictures of the castle and some of the folks involved. That's at one word, lastbattleineurope.com on Facebook.
And it's in fact, that's where you and I met, was on Facebook.
Exactly.
On your page. Do you have a page now? You've got your own page as well, or?
I do, but there's a reason why I don't give that out. It happens that my son is an actor on a very popular television show.
Oh.
And so if I put my own page out there, I tend to get a lot of friend requests from fans of his show. So.
Right. Again, thank you so much for the time, Steve. And if you would, hold on a second after the break here, okay?
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure.
We'll be back in 167 hours on Taking Care of Business on Koerner Radio, News Talk 1180.